Primetime. It is a gray Saturday in Montreal, but wherever you are, and I hope you're somewhere where there's playoff hockey being played, or at the very least, somewhere where you can watch the Stanley Cup playoffs. I hope it's a beautiful day. I hope you're enjoying it, and a happy Saturday. Welcome to Hockey Primetime. Is this our new home, 1 to 3 on Saturday afternoons? We've done so many different times over the years, 2 to 4, 5 to 7. Here we are, 1 to 3. I'm settling into a little bit of a comfort zone here. I haven't had a long layoff like the Tampa Bay Lightning have had. They're going to be back at it to this afternoon at 3 o'clock. You can listen to that game live right here on the SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, part of an NHL doubleheader today. How did the Vegas Golden Knights follow up that 7-0 win against the Sharks the other day? Yes, this is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna, here with you for the next couple hours, and very, very pleased about it with Laura Saba. Laura's the producer of the show, responsible for booking the guests and much of the content that we deliver to you on the air here. Hello, Laura.
How's it going, Connor?
Fantastic, Laura. I'm having the best day of my life. So nice to be here with you. And we're here in Montreal. For those of you who don't know, and if you can't watch us right now, we're on Facebook Live. Hello to everybody watching at home. We're on Periscope and YouTube Live. We're here in the Hockey Primetime, the luxurious Hockey Primetime studio in the St. Henry district in the southwest of Montreal, not far from the Bell Center. And here in Montreal, I think there's maybe a little bit of optimism. There's a little bit of happiness. The Montreal Canadiens hired a guy who everybody thought that they should hire. I'm not sure if they based this decision off what people were saying on talk radio and writing in the newspapers in both languages here in the city, but Dominique Ducharme, who you know, if you're a hockey fan, you're aware of Dominique Ducharme's body of work, longtime coach of the Halifax Mooseheads during their heyday with Nathan McKinnon and Jonathan Drouin, and of course, a coach of Team Canada's World Junior team as well, right?
I always think of Goon whenever you say Halifax Mooseheads, and I always think of him as that Kim Coates character.
Is that right?
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know. I guess it's just because it's set in Halifax, but I do enjoy it. I've known Dominique Ducharme for 10 years, and I spent time early in my career. I've done a lot of stuff here. I haven't always been the host of Hockey Primetime, although really for much of my career I actually have been. But for the last 10 years or so, I've been working in hockey media one way or the other, covering the Montreal Canadiens. And I used to do a little bit of work with the Montreal Juniors. That's a now defunct Quebec Major Junior Hockey League team that was coached by Pascal Vincent, who recently won AHL Coach of the Year as the coach of the Manitoba Moose out there in, Manitoba, obviously. And one of his assistants was Dominique Ducharme, and I did the play-by-play commentary for their some of their games, the Montreal Juniors, and would travel with the junior team. And I mentioned this in the wake of the Humboldt Broncos tragedy, the time that I've spent riding buses in remote locations with junior hockey teams. But Dominique Ducharme was an assistant coach with the team, and he was a guy who would occasionally, when me and my partner Sean Campbell would be at the only bar in Rouyn-Noranda having a beer, sometimes Dominic would show up and hang out with us for a little bit. Always a super nice guy, which is, I think, meaningful in some ways. But his really his resume since then, going from an assistant as a now defunct team to one of the hottest prospects in coaching. This is a great, great hire for the Montreal Canadiens. I love this move. I love what I heard Claude Julien say about it, and they needed to do something. It was always weird that Claude Julien became the coach of the Canadiens, and it was in the middle of the season, so he kept the assistants. But last year in the offseason, it was like, what? He continued to keep them, despite the problems with the special teams and all of those things.
Well, and also, it's just, those are somebody else's assistant coaches. Those were Michel Therrien's assistants. It's very unusual for an NHL coach to take over a team and to keep somebody else's assistants. So Dominique Ducharme is in, and who's out? Jean-Jacques Daigneault and Dan Lacroix are out. So there's still a vacancy to be filled on the bench for the Montreal Canadiens, but a nice hire, a nice job, and we'll see what happens here, right? They keep Kirk Muller, they keep Stefan Waite, and we'll see if they can beef up that coaching staff a little bit more. The next thing that we're going to be waiting for is to find out who's going to be the coach, possibly the general manager of their American Hockey League team in Laval. And I think the smart money right now is on Joël Bouchard, who's still involved in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League playoffs right now with the Blainville Boisbriand Armada. What a name. So we'll have more on that with Arpon Basu a little bit later on this morning.
It's not morning, right?
Afternoon.
Yeah,
it feels like morning.
Does it?
Yeah, the sun never came out.
I got up at like 11 o'clock today, which is crazy for me. I don't normally do that. You know me, I don't sleep. But why was I up late last night? I was watching the Winnipeg Jets total the Nashville Predators, the Preds who brought in. Give me your take on this, Laura. The Preds, Smashville, we know they like to bring in a car and everybody gets to smash the car.
Yeah.
We saw this, right?
Right. They did it last year against Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah, I think they've been doing it for a long time.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, they had one there when we were there for the All-Star game.
Exactly.
And you pay $5 and you get a hammer and you get to smash the car, right? Everybody smashes the car. So you're aware of the
jet. The non-jet.
Not a jet.
Not an actual jet.
Not a jet, right? Just a plane. Just an airplane.
And people are upset that it's a jet. It's not a jet.
I think that's
a regular plane.
Is that not fair? I understand why. Like a jet is super expensive, right? And if you buy one, you don't want to smash it.
I mean, Mark Dumont, a good friend of the show, brought up this point. He's like, yes, it's not accurate. Very much like their previous series against the Pittsburgh Cars and the Colorado Cars. I mean,
right.
I understand that the smash car is a thing, and I do understand that they kind of upgraded their own. It's like an inside joke. It's part of the playoff experience. I understand that.
Huh.
But I mean, it's a plane. It's something to smash. For me, it's like it's cool because you get to smash a thing.
Right.
So yes. I don't think it's that big a deal that it's not an actual jet.
Right. And I think you're right about that, right? That's obviously this is what we do. It's 2018 and we like to split hairs and parse everything and overanalyze stuff. It's like, it's a fun thing where they go in and they smash an old airplane. Who cares?
And it's for charity, right? Like the $5 that you give, it goes to their foundation.
I think so.
There's something good about it too, right?
Smashing things for a good cause, for sure. But it's true that I do hope they don't apply this logic going forward of let's bring in a plane because we're playing the Jets, because next round either they're going to bring in some poor unsuspecting shark and smash a shark,
or a knight.
Well, in all likelihood, based on game one, it's going to be a man who's a gilded knight wearing gold armor, and people are just going to come in and smash this dude with a sledgehammer. That sounds terrible.
Right, but I just thought of it. Like they could have a cool, like a huge armor, like a replica armor, just like enlarge it. Huh. It's something metal.
Enlarge it, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yes,
style?
Exactly
yeah?
like that. Okay. But yeah, I mean, they could enlarge it. They could have like a big, knight made out of metal that people can smash. I mean, but I would please do not smash sharks. Nashville, please don't.
Well, what if it's like a metal shark or something? Is that okay?
that works.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We don't want to encourage violence against sharks and endangered species in some respect. And by many accounts, you wouldn't necessarily know this. I'm kind of scared of sharks. It's one of the reasons I don't really love swimming in the ocean. All the things that can kill me kind of stops me sometimes. And sharks are one of those things. I don't want to be eaten by a shark. You?
No, I definitely do not want to be eaten by a shark.
Good. Well, so we agree about that too. So the Preds last night, they said after the game, and I think it was PK Subban who said this, that they played their best game of the playoffs so far.
It didn't, you know what? I was watching it and we had a little discussion about this before the show. And I am coming around. Connor said that, Nashville played an amazing game and they basically got stonewalled by the goalie.
I didn't say they played an amazing game.
You said they played a really good game.
They got 48 shots on goal. I said that.
Okay, that. When I was watching it, it didn't look that great. And I think it's entirely possible I was biased because I am, I'm very impressed with Winnipeg this year, and the goaltending has really been a big part of their story throughout the year. And I just kept getting frustrated. I kept wanting them to score. I wanted competitive series. I wanted overtime in that series. And so it felt like they weren't playing as well as I wanted them to. So when I came in today, I was like, yeah, Nashville didn't play that great. But I understand your perspective.
Well, they definitely took it to the Jets for like long periods of time.
Yeah, there was sustained offense.
But I think it must be noted here, right? Because you always hear stuff like this of like, oh, we played really well. Then it's like, well, but your goalie didn't play very well. So are you saying other than the goalie, we played really well? Because you did lose the game 4-1. Some of the goals were not great. I understand they weren't like bananas, as some would say, or give me a word. You got a word for a bad goal?
For a bad goal, garbage goal.
A garbage goal?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So
a laugher?
Sure, yeah. Some might say a howler if you're a soccer fan. But a bad goal, the kind of goal where, you always hear this from announcers, and I think it's kind of a stupid thing to say, but, oh, he'd like to have that one back. Believe me, bud.
They'd like to have all of them.
Having played a little bit of goal in my life, you want every single one back. Every goal, no matter how beautiful it is, you want it back. But these were not, they weren't of the sort of, oh no, what a terrible goal variety, but they were saves that I'd say at least half of them you need your goalie to make in situations like this. These are the two best teams in the National Hockey League. And I know people got super triggered when I threw this out on Twitter yesterday saying that I don't think Pekka Rinne can take the Preds to the promised land. I personally, and I understand, I know how stupid that sounds on the surface. He's going to be the Vezina. He's going to win the Vezina Trophy this year, right?
Yeah.
But last year, you remember how he couldn't win a game in Pittsburgh in the Stanley Cup final? They lost so many guys, right? They had no Johansson, and they were decimated up the middle. They lost a number of players, and that was part of it. But part of it was Pekka Rinne could not, for the life of him, win a hockey game in the city of Pittsburgh. And he also struggled on the road at other points in the series. This was different because the Preds were at home, but like it's not to say that it's Pekka Rinne's fault that the Preds lost that game necessarily. It's just to say that he needs to be as good as Connor Hellebuyck was. In a goaltending duel, those are going to happen. There's going to be goaltending duels, and you've got to go toe-to-toe with the other guy. Connor Hellebuyck was much better than Pekka Rinne was in that game yesterday, and that was a factor. It wasn't the only factor, but it was a factor in why the Jets took a 1-0 lead in the series and kind of stole home ice away from the Preds.
Right, and it is early in the second round, so it's a little bit early for Rinne to start looking shaky. If they expect to make a long run, there are a lot of games left. There are only better teams coming, assuming that they get out of the series. So they really, he definitely needs to get it together.
If the Preds play the way that they played game 1 and game 2, and Pekka Rinne is maybe just a little bit better, and Connor Hellebuyck is maybe a little bit more human than superhuman, the Preds tie the series up, and we're headed to Winnipeg. And I'm not saying I'm not calling the series by any stretch. Should be a really good series, but Pekka Rinne, I'll tell you one thing he is going to now have to do. He's going to have to win a big game on the road in this series after losing game 1 at home. Can he do that? That remains to be seen, but should be a lot of fun. Now, what do we have coming up today? Boston, Tampa at 3 o'clock. Can Tuukka Rask play the way he played against the Leafs and hope to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning?
No.
No?
No.
The Lightning, man, when was the last time the Lightning played a game? It's been
a while.
It's been like, man, it's been
over
a while.
A week, right?
I think, yeah.
I want to say over a week.
I would think so, right? Because the Leafs played on Wednesday. I think that was the Leafs Bruins game was Wednesday, and even then the Lightning had been off for a while.
Yeah.
So it has been a while, and today at 3 o'clock, Boston, Tampa, and we'll see if there's any rust for Tampa. But I really, Tuukka Rask, he was lucky that Freddie Anderson was worse than he was, because 4-3 in the third period, the story was that Tuukka Rask was bad and the Leafs were going to move on. And then Freddie Anderson was worse and the Bruins are going to move on.
Ended up moving on. And I remember seeing a story, I think it was game 3 or 4, where it was somebody said Tuukka Rask is back. And then the following game, he was definitely not back.
But he's
a great goaltender. He's just not playing very well right now.
There's a lot of questions about Tuukka Rask. There's a lot of Bruins fans who don't like him. They don't believe that he can take them to the promised land. I think he was going into that game. He was 5-11 career in elimination games. It's not a good stat. 6-11 now, but and that's a hard act to follow. Tim Thomas and that run he had when they won the Stanley Cup, to come in and try to be the next guy after that. Imagine
it's going to be hanging over his head.
Imagine replacing Patrick Roy in Montreal. It's a hard act to follow. And did I just compare Tim Thomas to Patrick Roy? Yes. Is that fair? No, probably not. But one of the great performances in a Stanley Cup playoff that we've ever seen from Tim Thomas back then. Great. Well, I don't know if it was great, but the Vegas Golden Knights game 1 was. It was something, and the thing I appreciated about it was I could turn it off after the first period and go to bed with a clear conscience. There was no way in hell that San Jose was going to come back and win that game. But 7-0, 7 different scores. Vegas has played 5 games. They've won all 5. They've won all 5. They've allowed just 3 goals. 3 goals in 5 games. They've scored 14. And it's 3 shutouts in 5 games for Marc-Andre Fleury. So I don't know. This was the first time all season long I was saying, Vegas, the bubble's gonna burst. I don't believe it. Blah blah blah. I'm on board, baby. I'm picking Vegas. I told you last week. Vegas beats Pittsburgh. Marc-Andre Fleury beats Matt Murray in the Stanley Cup final. I don't know. We'll see about that. I did pick the Jets, actually, to win the Stanley Cup earlier in the playoffs. All right, coming up next, we have a very special guest joining us, our first of many very special guests. His name is Arpon Basu. He covers the Montreal Canadiens and the world of Montreal sports for The Athletic in Montreal. And as we mentioned off the topic, a little bit of a shakeup here in Montreal as far as the coaching staff goes. So we'll get Arpon's reaction to that. And what else do the Canadiens need to do this offseason? We'll find out what Arpon thinks next. This is Hockey Prime Time. Nice to be with you. Happy Saturday. I will be with you right up until we flip it over to coverage of the Boston Bruins and the Tampa Bay Lightning from Amalie Arena. And we're going to have an Amalie on the show today. This is very exciting. We'll be back right after this. Hey, I'll tell you what I think of when I hear this song, and it's the opening scene in the classic film Dazed and Confused. I'm pretty sure, unless I'm wrong, this is the opening scene, this dude driving his sweet hot rod through the high school parking lot before. Just a great movie. And I love song association. You know? It's not as good as smell association, but still very good. What the hell am I talking about? Who cares? It's Hockey Prime Time. Nice to be with you. Happy Saturday afternoon from sunny Montreal in springtime. I'm Conor McKenna with Laura Saba with you until 3 o'clock today when we'll turn it over to coverage of Game 1. Finally, the Boston Bruins and the Tampa Bay Lightning will get at it later on today. It's going to be a while till the Montreal Canadiens hit the ice and play meaningful hockey, but they've got a busy couple of months ahead, and the work continues. Jean-Jacques Daigneault, a longtime defenseman here in Montreal who joined the staff back in 2012, was let go. Dan Lacroix had been with the club since 2014. He was let go as well. In comes Dominic Ducharme and somebody else, the mystery guest. With more on that and the story with the Habs right now, my friend Arpon Basu of The Athletic in Montreal joins us right now. Hello, Arpon.
Hey, Connor. I think the opening song in Days, isn't it School's Out for Summer that they open with?
No, that's when the middle school lets out and the
Right.
And the
I thought
kids,
that was the opening song.
they all try to get away from the dudes, and they're chasing them down the street. Then Ben Affleck gets a shotgun pulled on him right as he's about to.
Yeah.
So Arpon, a pleasure to be with you, and I guess kind of exciting news for the Canadians. It's interesting when a thing that everybody sort of wanted to happen ends up happening, and it seemed like everybody was unanimous in saying, "Get Dominic Ducharme, get Dominic Ducharme," and they got him, right? This seems like a good thing.
Well, yeah, it is a good thing, and it's actually somewhat unexpected. I think everyone kind of assumed that he would get the job in Laval with the AHL. So to get him with the Canadians and actually having an impact on the NHL team right now was mildly surprising. You know, like when I saw sort of the email pop up and I saw Dom Ducharme's name, I was like, oh, great, they hired him for Laval, good for them. And then, but it's probably even better because when you think about it, you know, the Canadians have like a responsibility and an obligation really to sort of develop potential coaches that they could one day hire, you know, coaches who are bilingual and who are qualified and accomplished and what have you. So by putting Ducharme behind the Canadians bench, they still can fill the role in Laval. So really what they're doing is they're developing two coaches instead of just one. So I think it's putting Ducharme with the Canadians obviously has its direct benefits that you'll have him behind the bench. He's going to be able to work with the players. But the added benefit is that that basically they get a 2-for-1 deal here in developing two younger coaches, one in the AHL and one behind the bench in the NHL.
It is of particular importance, right? I think this is something that every organization probably should be doing, is you want to have sort of potential or guys that are tabbed as future NHL head coaches in the organization at some level. But for the Canadians, it is, considering the fact that they have such a much smaller pool of candidates to choose from when it comes to filling vacancies, it is of particular importance for this organization, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of people don't really understand that. I think a lot of people express frustration that the Canadians insist on hiring a bilingual coach, but it's really it's of utmost importance to the franchise, and frankly, I think it should be. You know, and I don't think they've actually hired. They haven't been held back to any great degree by this. You know, you look at the coaches they've hired over the last, say, 15, 20 years. Even some of the rookie guys they hired, they went on to, you know, Claude Julien being one of them, Alain Vigneault being another. Even Michel Therrien, you know, got hired by the Penguins and still found other work in the NHL. So it's not as if it's hampering them, but the optics of being able to communicate with your own fan base, a fan base who outside of Montreal really, you know, largely doesn't speak English, I think is important. And I think it's something that they should continue doing. But if they have that policy, it's incumbent on them to develop their own potential coaches of the future, which is why having Sylvain Lefebvre and Laval for so long, or on their AHL team for so long, was so misguided or short-sighted, I guess, because, you know, I don't think anyone saw Sylvain Lefebvre as a future NHL coach. Maybe Sylvain Lefebvre did, but I don't think anyone on the outside did. So, you know, not having that sort of breeding ground being used in an optimal way for so long, I think was really a mistake. So they've corrected that now. Now there's an opening in Laval, but now they've doubled down by adding Ducharme next to Claude Julien in Montreal, where he could, you know, eventually maybe even be a successor to Claude Julien one day.
It was always kind of weird, wasn't it, that he kept Michel Therrien's assistants for like a season and a half?
Yeah, he talked about that yesterday and sort of said, listen, I didn't feel it was fair, you know, after spending like basically just February, March, and a bit of April with these guys. I don't think I had enough time to properly evaluate them, so he wanted to give them another chance for a year. But usually when a kind of a high-profile head coach comes in, he likes to bring in his own people as quickly as possible. So, you know, I think this should have been expected for Dan Lacroix and JJ Daigneault. And because I think under normal circumstances, or what we've seen at least when there's a coaching change, those guys would have been gone at the beginning of this season. So they got a year, and then, you know, what happened. And so now Claude Julien is making some changes. And I think, you know, from the sounds of it yesterday, you know, he's going to want to bring in either a former defenseman or someone who has experienced coaching defenseman onto his staff as well to handle the blue line. And, you know, taking the somewhat unusual step of having 4 guys behind the bench. There's a handful of NHL teams that do it now, but the Canadiens are going to be one of them as well. So, I mean, those are 2 pretty, you know, significant. And the one thing that Julian mentioned about the defenseman hire that I found interesting, he volunteered this. No one asked him about it, but he said, you know, it's not necessarily going to be a francophone. If it is, so be it. That'll be even better. But I'm just going to look for the best guy, which to me sounded like he had someone in mind who either is still in the playoffs or they just can't talk to yet or what have you. But he had someone in mind, and the guy's not francophone, so he was kind of laying the groundwork for saying, okay, listen, we got our guy here in Ducharme, but I mean, the next guy is not necessarily going to be a French speaker.
Chris Pronger?
That would be a bit of a step down.
Imagine?
Yeah, I don't know.
That'd
be great.
That would be amazing.
Chris Pronger around would be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
Very funny. Yeah, I would love it.
All right. Apparently, and this is breaking right now, that the Carolina Hurricanes have apparently just asked the Canadiens, or at least Renaud Lavoie has just broken that the Hurricanes have asked permission to talk to Rick Dudley. Not for the GM position, which it's interesting. His contract is up in just I guess in a month and a half or something like that. And we know that he's very close with Marc Bergevin, but just a little tidbit for you there. And Joël Bouchard speaks French, but it seems like a lot of people are talking about him for the Laval vacancy. They've signed a couple of his players, the Canadiens have done. What do you think about him as an option? And he is still in the playoffs, and maybe that's why we haven't heard anything. But any feel one way or the other about Joël Bouchard as the AHL head coach?
Yeah, I think it's pretty likely. I mean, you know, unless something kind of comes out of nowhere, but he just seems like a natural fit. You know, player development has been his thing. He's held like management positions with Hockey Canada at the World Juniors. I mean, you know, Dom Ducharme was the head coach, and Joel Bouchard was the GM of that team that won the gold with Victor Mete on it just a few months ago. So, but you know, it does appear, especially with them. You know, they signed the one guy, Alain, who's on the team now, but they went and signed 2 other guys who used to play for them, so to AHL deals, which you know got you know everyone's radar going that okay, well this kind of looks fishy, but you know maybe they'll pull someone else out and they'll be a surprise candidate. But right now, I think I wouldn't be surprised if it's not long after the Armada get knocked out. If they do get knocked out, they have a good chance of winning it all. That they'll be naming him the head coach of Laval.
So we'll wait and see on that. Meanwhile, it's draft lottery announcement day, and it's only going to take 6 hours total to from start to finish to find out who's going to be picking where. Yeah. Thanks to our friends at Sportsnet, or if you believe the people at Sportsnet, thanks to the NHL. But who do you covet other than the obvious question of Rasmus Dahlin? Who do you covet if you're Marc Bergevin in this draft as it stands right now?
I don't know. I won't even begin to guess. I mean, it's, I think that, what I'm gathering, I'm not a prospect expert, and I kind of hate it when people who cover the NHL all season start talking all experty about prospects.
Oh my God, it's the best. It's the best. I can't wait to start doing that. No. But you guys have Corey Pronman at the Athletic, and I know he's going to be doing a chat today.
One of the best. Absolutely.
So I guess the answer would be check out the chat that's going to be going on at the Athletic today.
Well, I mean, I think the one thing I can say is that there appear to be several candidates high in the first round of this draft who could potentially step right into the NHL. And I think, considering where the Canadiens are at, it's something they should consider. I mean, it's just like, it's something that maybe they should put more of an emphasis on than they would in years past when they were obviously a better team and probably picking lower in the draft. But I mean, in today's game, you see it more and more often where players just step right in out of the draft and onto a roster. And so, unfortunately for the Canadiens, there's not that big, sexy stud center in this draft anywhere close to where they should be picking. I mean, I think the highest rated center is Joe Veleno, and it would be a bit of a stretch, even if the Canadiens drop all the way to 7th. It would be a bit of a stretch for them to take him. But there's a lot of defensemen available, and maybe one of those guys a la Victor Mete last season, could step in this season and jump into the top 6 because that left side is so wide open. So that's the one area where I think, they might want to consider doing something.
Do we really want to see another teenager stepping into the top 6 for the Canadiens next season?
What are the alternatives?
Can Jonathan Drouin play D? Maybe. No. You make a good point. No, you make a good point.
I mean, there's the trade market. The trade market is there. Like if they can go land someone by a trade, be my guess, that'd be great. But the free agent market, especially as far as lefty go, is not great this year. And so that kind of leaves them with the draft or trading for one. And I think barring a trade, it's something that they should consider when they're evaluating all the defensemen who are kind of bunched into the top 10 there, is who is the most likely to maybe make an impact as of next season.
Arpon, I'll tell you what I'd do if I was the general manager. I'd win the draft lottery, get Rasmus Dahlin, then I'd sign John Tavares in the offseason. Boom. Stanley Cup contender right there.
Man, why are you not a GM?
I don't know. I've been asking myself the same question.
I didn't even think of it.
Yeah.
This solution never even dawned on me.
I know. Anyway. Hey, you should hire me. I'll write about it at the Athletic, and then you know what?
That exact thing on Monday. Yeah.
If I was GM by Conor McKenna,
that's right.
A 69-part series. Arpon, thank you for your time.
How the Canadians win the lottery?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. Like, it seems so simple to me from where I'm standing. Thank you for your time, bud. I appreciate it. Oh, hey, and when are we going for Chinese food, bud?
I don't know. It's just I'm in Toronto right now. I'm here to do this lottery deal, so that's why I can't. I can't do it tonight.
That's fair. That's legit.
It's coming. You won the bet. We're even now.
How about this coming Friday?
In 1 year.
This coming Friday? We doing this? Are you going to be here?
That's possible. Yeah. That's a possibility.
All right.
Let's look further into this.
It's if you agree to something. All right, thank you, Arpon. And a lot of people don't know this, if you agree to something on the radio, it's essentially a binding contract. I bet Arpon earlier this year that Max Pacioretty would not score. I think the number I set it was
35.
35, and I think I gave you like an over/under, like maybe 34.5 or something like that. And he didn't even get halfway there.
30,
all right, you have to stop talking. We gotta go. I love you, Arpon. Right. Thank you. Cheers. Okay, that's Arpon Basu from The Athletic, covering the Montreal Canadiens, and as he mentioned, in Toronto for all the excitement of the draft lottery. What a night that was, a Wednesday in Toronto, especially on the heels of everything that's happened in the past week. They had the Raptors in the playoffs playing a huge game, the Leafs involved in a Game 7, TFC in the Champions League final. The Blue Jays are involved. I think were the Jays playing the Red Sox that night?
Yes.
Damn. I'm not going to say I'm jealous of Toronto sports fans, but I'm jealous of Toronto sports fans. Coming up next, let's talk Tampa Bay Lightning. They finally get back at it next here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. We'll talk to Erik Erlendsson of LightningInsider.com. He's been covering the Lightning for the last decade and a half. We'll get his take on everything from a Lightning standpoint ahead of that game. Next, this is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. and the Lightning, right? The Tampa Bay Lightning, geez, like, these guys haven't played in like a month. When was the last time you watched a Lightning game? So much stuff has happened since the last time the Tampa Bay Lightning played a game. It hasn't been that long, but it does feel like a lengthy break. I hope that Erik Erlendsson has been enjoying it. He's been covering the Tampa Bay Lightning for the last decade and a half or so. He now covers them at lightninginsider.com. If you're a fan of the Tampa Bay Lightning, definitely worth checking it out and subscribing. And that is a good hockey team. They're going to go at it at 3 o'clock today against the Boston Bruins. Erik is on the line to join us next. Hello, Erik Erlendsson. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Connor. Hey, you know what hasn't happened since the Lightning last played? Vegas still hasn't lost a game.
That's a fair point, and they've scored a lot of goals, too. How long has it been? I feel like, is it a week, or is it more than that?
It was a week. It was a week ago today. They beat Jersey in Game 5 and moved on, so yeah.
All right. Well, that's that can certainly be a good thing, getting a little bit of rest, and rewards teams for finishing opponents off a little bit sooner than some others do. The Bruins last played on Wednesday, so they get a decent a little rest as well. What effect, if any, do you expect the layoff to have on this team?
I don't expect it to have much. I mean, just as we talked about with Vegas, and I know both Vegas and San Jose swept their opener round series, but it certainly had no effect on Vegas. They came out swarming the Sharks on Thursday nights. And, you know, there's such a veteran group in that Lightning locker room, so much playoff experience, guys that have been through almost every scenario and almost any situation that you can imagine in the postseason. You know, they got 3 full days off. They got off Sunday and Monday completely off. They were not on the ice on Thursday. So they got 3 really good days of practice, really pushed the pace. Actually did some scrimmage and some simulation stuff to kind of get the competitive juices kind of amped back up a little bit during the week, but I really don't think it's going to have much of effect. Maybe the first couple of shifts you got to get your skates under you and get a feel for the puck. But other than that, I don't think it's going to be much of an issue for Tampa.
And do you get a? I mean, you talk to these guys all the time. Were they watching the Bruins Leafs series?
Oh yeah, they were watching, and they were actually kind of disappointed it wasn't about 4 overtimes in Game 7 the way those teams were going. But yeah, no, they watched it. Others, no doubt. I mean, a guy like Steven Stamkos is a huge fan of the game. So even during the regular season, he's watching games on nights off and stuff like that. So yeah, they pay I think pretty close attention to it for the most part.
And so yeah, they get the Boston Bruins. And how did they play them? And I'm sure you know this. What was it like this season in games between the Bruins and the Lightning?
Well, Boston won 3 out of the 4, but the interesting part of their regular season meetings is that 3 of them took place in the final 3 weeks of the season. And from a Tampa perspective, it was a progression for them because Boston came in here on March the 17th and absolutely owned Tampa. It was a game that, you know, Tampa felt they had to get up their energy for. They had to get their intensity up. It was supposed to be a playoff game, and Boston just came in here and absolutely flattened them. It was a 3-0 game, the only time Tampa's been shut out all year. So the next time they faced each other, about a week and a half later in Boston, Tampa was a little bit better. They started to control the game a little bit more. They pushed the pace a little bit more and felt really good about their game. They don't get the win, but they felt good about the way they played. And then the 2 teams meet again in the final week of the regular season here at Amalie Arena, and Tampa was the better team on the ice. They took it to Boston. They got their forecheck established. So it's almost like they kind of read each game because they were so close to the end of the regular season and found a way to kind of compete and make sure that they could be on the same level with the Bruins and get past the Bruins in terms of how they wanted to play. So I'll be interested to see if that sort of progression carries over into the series because we know regular season results don't necessarily translate to postseason. We saw that with Tampa and Jersey in the first round. But the way, just because those games are so close to the end of the regular season, I'm interested to see if some of the way that Tampa played carries over into the series.
Yeah, you're right about that. You don't want to read too much into it, but I do remember, and I'm sure you will too, Erik, a couple of years ago, the Montreal-Tampa regular season, right? I guess it was after the Habs swept the Lightning in the playoffs, and the Lightning just decimated the Canadians all regular season long. And then they met in the playoffs, and it wasn't as one-sided as it was during the regular season, but they did have them. It's weird how these matchups can work out, but you're right. There's no way, and you should not read too much into it. It's a different animal right now, and we've seen this already in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Andrei Vasilevsky, we know he's the guy. We know he's a Vezina finalist, and really was running away with the Vezina trophy for the first half or so of the season. But I think the smart money now is on Pekka Rinne after Vasilevsky just frankly wasn't as good in the second half of the year. What happened to him?
Well, it was more to do with what was going on in front of him. And Tampa just, they weren't the same team. They didn't have the intensity. They weren't, I don't want to say they were bored with the regular season, but you kind of felt that way at some point, especially as you got into February. They were just ready for the regular season to be over. And, you know, the intensity wasn't there. The focus wasn't there. They started turning the puck over on a regular basis and kind of hanging Vasilevsky out to dry a little bit. I think of a game late in the season at the New York Islanders. The game finishes 7-6. Tampa's got a 7-3 lead going into the third period, and they just get lazy with the puck. And all of a sudden, Vasilevsky's facing a one-on-one down low, and you get some skilled players on the Islanders team. It's those type of things that happened to him this year in the at the end of the towards the tail end of the regular season anyway, in terms of why his numbers were inflated. So I don't think it was all on him. There were still some games where he made the saves he had to make in games, but too many times the defense let him out to dry and just put him in some situations that was very hard for him to kind of control. And he wasn't making some of those wow saves that we saw earlier in the year either. So that wasn't in his game, but it started to come back, just like the team. It started to come back towards the tail end of the regular season, and I think against New Jersey, he really found his game again. And as that series got on, I thought Vasilevsky became better and better.
Raring to go. The Tampa Bay Lightning meet the Boston Bruins today at 3 o'clock. You can listen to that game here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio if you're not watching it on television. And thankfully, for the first time in the last few weeks, we don't have two games starting at the same time on Saturday afternoon. All the attention can be paid to this one. So what is the path to victory for the Lightning against the Boston Bruins, other than the obvious answer? How do the Lightning win this series?
You can't say just score more goals.
Well, that would be the obvious answer for sure.
I think there's three keys for Tampa Bay. Number one is stay out of the penalty box. Boston's power play is extremely dangerous. We saw that against Tampa in the regular season. I think we saw it against Toronto in the first round. I thought Boston's power play was absolutely on fire. Tampa can't do that in this series. They can't put themselves in the box 5, 6, 7 times a game and expect to be able to kill off enough power plays to be able to keep yourself in this series. I think the other thing is get your forecheck established. Go at Boston's defense, get the puck in, use your speed to establish the forecheck and create some offensive zone time. We've seen them do it. That was one of the things that they did in that last regular season meeting against the Bruins to kind of help dictate play a little bit. And the other one is manage the puck. Again, Boston can be a team that will wait for you to make a mistake and they'll pounce on it and they'll make you pay for it. We've seen that many times. I think that's one of Boston's strengths, is to be able to do that. So manage the puck, stay out of the box, and establish your forecheck. To me, those are the three things that Tampa has to do in this series to have some success. And
I guess the other thing would be, how do they lose this series? I like them to win it. I picked them to win it. But what is the Bruins' path to victory here?
It's attack Tampa's defense. I think that's the way you have to beat Tampa. Don't let them play too much in your own zone. They're so deep with so many skilled forwards up and down their lineup that they can beat you if you let them spend too much time in your offensive zone. So I think, Boston usually likes to play a pacey game. I think they have to push the pace a little bit in this series if they want to beat Tampa. Put pressure, make Tampa play in its own end more often, because it's not a strength of theirs. They're not the best team in the world at getting the puck out of their own zone and getting out of danger. The addition of Ryan McDonough has helped in that aspect in terms of making some plays under pressure and showing some poise back there. But that's Tampa's weakness. If you're going to attack them, that's the way you have to do it. Make them play in their own zone, because they are prone to getting hemmed in, which will wear them out and give you more scoring chances. And Boston's a dangerous enough team, especially with that top line of Bergeron, Pastrnak, and Marchand, that if you let them spend too much time in there, they're going to burn you.
How much do you think the fact, Erik, that the Lightning fell short of the playoffs a year ago and had that lengthy offseason, how much do you think that's sort of, obviously it wasn't a good thing at the time, but how much do you think that helped them this year in a way to have that much time to rest, recover after a couple of lengthy runs in the preceding seasons?
I think it helps in two ways, and you just touched on it there with the rest and the recovery that they get, because they've had some guys on this team that played a lot of hockey over the last number of years. They reached the Stanley Cup final in 2015. They reached the conference final in 2016. You have a couple of other guys like Anton Stralman, who had reached the Stanley Cup final the previous year with the New York Rangers. These guys are playing for in the World Cup of Hockey, and so there's a lot of mileage on some of those players. So it gave a lot of them a full summer to kind of really rest themselves and recover. A guy like Tyler Johnson, even the year that Tampa got knocked out of the postseason in 2014 in 4 games, he went and played for the USA in the World Championship. So it just gave those guys a chance to kind of rest, something they hadn't experienced in terms of that long off summer. They don't like it. None of them will tell you they ever like it, but it can be helpful in that aspect, that you get the whole summer to get yourself ready for the next season. And the other thing I think it fueled them. I think the big talk coming into training camp this year was how much the sting from not making the playoffs hurt them and how much it really fueled their hunger. And sometimes that's just lip service, but it wasn't in this case, because if you see the way Tampa came out to start the regular season, it showed that they were a hungry team. They were pissed off they didn't make the playoffs last year, and they came out to prove something. They came out and did it, and I think that fuel and that hunger is still going on here as now they've reached the second round this year.
Erik, thank you for your time as always. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Connor. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
That is Erik Erlendsson. LightningInsider.com is the website. If you are a follower or a fan of the Tampa Bay Lightning, you definitely should check out his site and get everything from a guy who has been covering that team for, a pretty long time. I don't know if anybody knows more about the Tampa Bay Lightning than Erik Erlendsson, but some terrific guys covering that team. And it's nice how it's one thing that happens when a team that you're covering, in my case, the Montreal Canadiens, faces a team that is covered by guys like Erik in the playoffs, as you get to hang out, you get to see these guys a little bit. You go there, they come here, you show them a little bit of Montreal. And I can tell you this about the guys who cover the Tampa Bay Lightning, and in fact, even the coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Those guys know how to throw down after hours. Coming up next, the draft lottery. I know, you're a fan. There's somebody who's a fan of a team, and you want your team to win the draft lottery. The question to me is not who do you want to win the draft lottery. Who do you not want to win the draft lottery? Let's tackle that next as we wrap up hour number 1. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. podcast at hockeyprimetime.com, the website. We've got old episodes of the show, old segments, old takes that are still as hot as they were the day that we spewed them out. That's not a very nice way of saying it. I spewed them out. I got to come up with something better than that. The day that they were taken? I'm not sure. Anyway, the important thing is this is Hockey Primetime, and we do have a website, and it's a beautiful website, and we would love for you to go check it out at hockeyprimetime.com. You can not only can you stream the show live at hockeyprimetime.com, you can also, as we mentioned, listen to old segments, and all that stuff is just as good as it was the day that it was shared with you in the first place.
There you go. Shared.
Yeah, that's nice.
Or provided.
It's a little bit too nice, though, shared, you know?
Yeah, it's just spewing conjures up not very nice images.
So, Laura,
yes,
who do you want to win
Montreal?
The draft lottery.
Montreal.
You want to see Montreal win the draft lottery?
I'm a homer.
Okay, so give me a second choice for who you'd like to see win the draft lottery.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'm not actually sure. I don't, as long as Montreal wins it,
yeah,
I'm happy with it. I think it would be really annoying for fans if Chicago won it. It seems like, even when they're doing badly, they would have really good luck.
So, whoa, I didn't ask you who do you not want to win. That's the next question.
That's the next question.
I'm going to ask you.
Who do I want to win? Like, really, all I wanted was for Montreal to have a good position and
fair.
Pick up a good pick.
I think that this is the thing, right? Is especially after Jersey went from the 5th best odds to winning the lottery last year, everybody like optimism reigns eternal for everybody, right? The Flyers jumped 2.
I think they were 11th or 10th.
Is that right?
They were really high, and then they dropped to second.
You know what? I kind of like it, and so we'll see. As it stands right now, Buffalo's got the best odds, and I know there's a lot of long-suffering Sabres fans out there. Ottawa's 2nd, Arizona's 3rd, Montreal 4th, and Detroit rounds out the top 5. Now, I'm going to tell you who I don't want, and look, to be fair, I want the Canadians to win the draft lottery because for the sake of my sanity as somebody who talks Habs like 16 hours a week probably on the radio, I just don't want them to be bad. I just please turn it around.
Or at least have good things to talk about.
Well,
like a positive future.
And it would be right there, boom, left side of the D. We were talking about this with Arpon Basu. Left side of the D, boom. He plays with Shea Weber. You've got a first pairing, and I don't know if that's going to work out, but on paper it seems really good. So I'm full disclosure, yes, I'm also a homer. I would like the Canadians to win the draft lottery, but honestly more for professional reasons than for fan reasons. I wouldn't hate it if Buffalo won. I know that the Sabres and everybody likes to laugh at Buffalo and make fun of Buffalo. Part of me wants the Sabres to be good. There's such a good fan base. They love their team so much. They love the sport so much. I think it'd be really cool to see them turn it around. And if they don't, I don't know, something's going to happen. Jack Eichel is going to have like an aneurysm and bail somehow on Buffalo. Who do I not want to win the draft lottery? I'll give you my teams. Ottawa. I don't want them to win the draft lottery.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
No way that after Eugene Melnyk and the debacle that was this season in Ottawa and everything they did and the whole Erik Karlsson thing, that they should be rewarded for this terrible, terrible season with Rasmus Dahlin. And here's the other one. I think almost everybody agrees with this. Edmonton. I do not want. I'm sorry. What do they have? 4 number 1 picks in the last 8 years.
They don't need any more to waste.
And especially since they got McDavid, it's like there should be a rule. I think in the first place, if you get the number 1 pick, you shouldn't be allowed to get the number 1 pick for like the next 5 years. And the Oilers have had enough number 1 picks, and they need him so badly.
1 minute.
Again, the team has been so badly run that it would kill me to see Peter Chiarelli rewarded with a player like Rasmus Dahlin. So that's who and I'm sorry, Oilers fans. I'm sorry, Senators fans. Arizona, I don't want him to land there because we're never going to see him. Detroit, another team that I think has been sort of grossly mismanaged that I wouldn't necessarily want to see him at. Chicago, I think it'd be kind of cool. I want the Blackhawks to be good again. All those guys are getting so old. Just for the love of God, not Edmonton and not Ottawa. You gotta.
Yeah, 30. No, I mean I agree with you with the Ottawa thing for sure. I have the same feelings about Buffalo that you do about Ottawa, though. So
okay, yeah, I got no love. Coming up next, let's talk Bruins. Amalie Benjamin of NHL.com is joining us on the other side. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. is our guest. She is joining us right now, covering the Boston Bruins, and has done for years. She's with NHL.com. And the Bruins managed to squeak by, as my father would say, by the skin of their teeth in Game 7 on Wednesday, and now here we are. We had a couple of days, and they're back at it. Coming up next here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio. Amalie is on the line with us right now. How you doing?
I am good. I am caught between two games of soccer between the Lightning and the Bruins, so if you hear any unexplained blood-curdling screams, that's related to those.
Well, I always wonder about that. And you see all these guys, they do this. They, in the hallway, outside the locker room, play soccer to get sort of loosen up, I guess you could say, before the game. How crazy would it be if a player, like, broke his ankle? It's not inconceivable. In fact, I think it's almost inevitable that it's going to happen, that a guy is going to hurt himself while doing that. How crazy would that be if it happened in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, you sort of watch them, and these are not, mild. These are intense games. There's yelling, there's headers, there's all sorts of stuff, as you may or may not be able to hear in the background. So these are some intense games, and I definitely could see that happening. I've certainly seen enough balls caught in the ceiling and doing damage to the arena. Maybe sometimes they'll end up doing damage to themselves.
I hope not. Certainly, we're crossing our fingers that everybody stays healthy, and the Bruins do seem to be relatively healthy, even after a 7-game series, an epic sort of 7-game series against the Toronto Maple Leafs. To go back to that, I mean, that was pretty fun, wasn't it? That best of 7.
That was a great series. I mean, any series that goes 7 and you get to that point where it can just go either way, depending on the bounces and just sort of the way hockey goes. It's really fun, and that was a particularly good series. There were a lot of twists and turns, and that's what you're looking for in the first round, I guess.
Indeed, and that was the only one. But I think that it's too early on too. The first round was kind of like couple of sweeps and some one-sided games, and it didn't seem that great. But by the time that game was over, I sort of looked back on the first round and said, that was actually pretty good. You had the comeback for the Washington Capitals, and then a couple of other things that were actually pretty fun to watch. Amalie, if again to go back in time, 40 minutes into that Game 7. The Leafs are up 4-3, and I'm thinking, man, oh man, is Tuukka Rask going to get it from Bruins fans? Perhaps deservedly so for the way that he played in this game. And then Jake Gardiner and Freddie Anderson rewrote history, sort of. And let's give Jake DeBrusk and the rest of the guys a little bit of credit too. But the question marks surrounding Tuukka Rask, and I know there's a lot of Bruins fans that just don't like the guy. Are the question marks surrounding this guy fair?
It's funny. This is a battle I've fought for a long time. I generally come down on the side of Tuukka. I think he is a better goaltender than a lot of people, certainly a lot of Bruins fans give him credit for. I think he really suffers in that he is not Tim Thomas. And he's never going to be Tim Thomas. That's just not the way he plays. That's not the person he is, for better or worse. And generally, I think it's pretty unfair. Now, I don't think he was at his best in the last series. I think Bruce Cassidy, Don Sweeney, they've acknowledged that they need more from Tuukka Rask, and I think there's no question going into this series against Tampa with the firepower that the Lightning have, with the ability to score quickly and in bunches, they need more from their goaltender. And it'd just be very hard to argue any other way right now.
Well, especially in this series, right? Like, he's got to be a whole lot better if they want to overcome the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, God bless the Leafs, but they ain't the Tampa Bay Lightning, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's certainly fair. The Leafs have still some more growing up to do, if you will. But this Lightning team is a very dangerous team, and I think there are things that you could point to that aren't just Tuukka Rask's performance. There were some defensive breakdowns that did not help him, that put him in a tough position. There were, as I said, certainly also saves that he should have made, but there are some ways in which his teammates did not help him, and I think that it'll be interesting to see if guys like Charlie McAvoy, who wasn't as good as we've seen him, gets better as he, is farther away from his injury that cost him a month at the end of the season. Things of that nature, because they'll need it to stop the Lightning.
We're talking to Amalie Benjamin of NHL.com, covering the Bruins and the Tampa Bay Lightning. So, and the sound you hear in the background is it the Bruins, is it the Lightning, or is it both of them playing soccer?
They're actually playing pretty close to each other. I think you're hearing the Bruins right now, but I was closer to the Lightning earlier. So they're sort of playing, I don't know, 50 feet away from each other in the sort of the main hall at Amalie Arena. So, you know, it's a little bit of a danger zone around here.
I remember, and we have come a long way from the days, and you talk to former players, and I've done this a few times. We talk to guys like, I remember Jean Beliveau saying this. He was like, you know, if a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs would walk into the same train car as a member of our team in the heyday, we would have to get up, and we couldn't be in the same train car as these guys. Now they're playing soccer 50 feet away from each other. These millennials, I tell you. The Jake DeBrusk story, and Jim Matheson had a piece in the Edmonton Journal. He says Jake DeBrusk became a Bruins folk hero in this series, and the Game 7 performance was something, but 5 goals in 7 games. This really was sort of a coming out party, wasn't it?
There's no question. You know, I think he had, you look at him, you look at David Pastrnak, the two of those guys had fantastic first rounds. But yeah, Jake DeBrusk, I mean, he's a guy who got a lot of heat when he was drafted. He wasn't Matthew Barzal, and he suffered, a little bit for that. But he really is a guy who sort of fits into this Bruins team. I was talking to his father, Louis DeBrusk, the former NHL player, a couple of days ago, and he said that, you know, he just saw it as a really good fit even from the start. And we're really seeing DeBrusk sort of come of age in these playoffs. He has some deceptive speed. He has greasiness. That's sort of the word that Louis DeBrusk used, that Don Sweeney used earlier this week. Stuff that really works for this team and works on that second line, which the Bruins probably need even more from, even with 5 goals from DeBrusk in the first round.
And I know one guy who definitely agrees with you about the deceptive speed of Jake DeBrusk. And yes, this will now be a gratuitous cheap shot at Jake Gardiner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who got fully turnstile, not just turnstile, but the wrong way on that game-winning goal, although underratedly bad goaltending from Freddie Anderson on that play as well. So now I got to ask you the important question here, Amalie. This is the question on the tips of everybody's tongue here around the National Hockey League. Did the NHL, or did they not, ask Brad Marchand to stop licking opponents?
You know, I will say I know nothing about it, and Marchand certainly denied it. He tweeted that is false to the Boston Globe. Beyond that, I don't know, but I'm sure at least Leo Komarov would be very happy to see him give up his licking ways.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I don't know if I really want to be licked by anybody, but definitely I would not. I know this for sure. I would not necessarily want to be licked by Brad Marchand. This is Hockey Primetime. My name's Conor McKenna. Nice to be with you. And we will take you to live coverage of the Bruins and the Tampa Bay Lightning about an hour from now. Puck drop will be happening, and this series will get going in earnest. The Lightning have been off for a week. The Bruins have been off since Wednesday. We all know what happened that night. You mentioned Charlie McAvoy being a little bit banged up, which seems clear. I think maybe we could say Patrice Bergeron as well. He did miss a game in that series, and at times maybe didn't necessarily look like himself. How banged up are the Bruins right now?
You know, I think that's fair that Patrice Bergeron, as good as that line played, maybe wasn't quite himself. As we all know, that's a guy who will play, pretty much no matter what happens. He played with a punctured lung. So, for him to miss that game in the first round is, a little bit worrisome. The Bruins in general aren't particularly banged up. They have the services of everyone, who they would want in their starting lineup. But yeah, you had a lot of guys who at the end of the year were coming off injuries. You had Riley Nash had a concussion and an ear laceration that required 40-plus stitches. You had Rick Nash had a concussion that cost him the last 12 games of the regular season. Charlie McAvoy only played a couple games at the end of the regular season after missing a month with an MCL. So you do have a lot of guys who had injuries at the end of the regular season who are, quote unquote healthy now, but those layoffs matter, and those layoffs mean something, and there maybe you could see some rustiness and some situations in which those guys weren't quite at their best.
And before I let you go, I wanted to ask you one more thing. Before I let you go and I'm sure you can join in on one of those soccer games. The only question is which one between the Bruins and the Lightning. The Bruins' fourth line, and I know, and I'm sure you remember the great fourth line of Sean Thornton, Gregory Campbell, Daniel Paille. When the Bruins were winning Stanley Cup Finals, going to Stanley Cup Finals years ago. Now you've got a new one. You've got 27-year-old Tim Schaller. You've got Sean Corrales, 25, 26-year-old Noel Acciari. How does this fourth line measure up? They've been good.
It's interesting. I think the Bruins have spent a lot of years trying to recreate the magic of that Merlot line. And we've watched a lot of guys sort of try and fail combinations that just haven't quite clicked, haven't quite worked, and they have spent a number of years not really getting a ton of production from that fourth line. I mean, it's been a couple of years since they let Paille go and Thornton went to Florida and such. So, I think they've been looking for that for a long time, and this fourth line does a really good job of the things they want it to do. It has a bit of grittiness, it has some guys who will drop the gloves, but it also has some guys who can score. You have double digits goals from a couple of those guys. You have guys who have a little bit of skill there, and that's really what you need. I mean, in this day and age, fourth lines are different than they were. When you look at Kapanen, for example, on a fourth line, you don't have just pure gritty type of guys. But it does seem like the Bruins fourth line sort of brings both of those things that they don't have maybe the speed that some of those other fourth lines have started to have. But you have guys who can go on the penalty kill and can provide you a goal or two sometimes when you need it. And they did have a couple in I think it was 4 total from that line in the first round, which were well needed because you didn't get enough from the second line and absolutely the third line.
Why did they call the Thornton Campbell Paille line the Merlot line?
When they would wear colored jerseys in practice, each line would there was the one line had gold jerseys,
right.
One line had white jerseys, one line had black, and they had Merlot colored jerseys.
Wow, very classy. All right. Well, hey, Amalie, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. Have fun covering the series.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on, Connor.
There's Amalie Benjamin, NHL.com at Amalie Arena, where the Bruins and the Lightning will begin hostilities in about 45 minutes time. We'll take you to live coverage there. I be forewarned that I believe, and this is what we usually do here at Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, probably, do you know the name of the guy? The Lightning play-by-play guy who's crazy. He goes
Dave Mishkin.
Dave Mishkin. That's probably the guy. I'm just saying, perhaps adjust your radio accordingly if the Tampa Bay Lightning score a goal, because when it comes to Dave Mishkin, every Lightning goal is the game-winning goal of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. This guy is something. So that I expect will be coming up later on today, and a lot of fun. Dave's a terrific guy. I'm not just taking a gratuitous cheap shot at the guy. I mean, I'm sure even he would admit that sometimes he takes it to the next level. He did call a Stanley Cup winner for the Tampa Bay Lightning years and years ago, and here they are again contending for the Cup. All right, coming up next, we've got a lot going on between now and 3 o'clock, and I hope you join us for all of it. We're going to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. That was something last night. Did the Nashville Predators play their best game of the playoffs, as PK Subban said they did? If so, why the hell did they lose 4-1? We're talking Winnipeg Jets with Scott Billeck of NHL.com and the Winnipeg Sun next. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
afternoon. I hope it's lovely wherever you are. I know it's lovely in Winnipeg today, regardless of the weather, because the Jets got the job done last night. A dream start for them. And you know what? Well, I'm looking at the Winnipeg weather right now. Gorgeous. The 13 degrees, high of 16 today. Sun. How about tomorrow? Sunny and 23. If you're not into Celsius temperatures, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
I want to say it's like
74.
70s, yeah.
74.
70s is usually pleasant.
So not too shabby there in the Peg, where it is going to be, as the millennials say, Laura, it is going to be lit at MTS Center when they play Game 3 there, especially after the way things went for them in Game 1. They gave up a lot of shots, but who cares? They won the game, and they won it handily in Smashville, despite the intimidation factor of Preds fans smashing an airplane outside of the building before the game. With more on that series and the story with the Winnipeg Jets, a pleasure to welcome to the show, covering the Jets for NHL.com, also the Winnipeg Sun, and more, Scott Billeck. Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
We're doing all right.
Sunny here today.
Yeah?
Yeah,
excellent.
Sunny here today. It's nice, sunny. Everything's good.
Excellent. And yeah, same way here in Montreal. And as Canadians, although I'm not going to try to say that Montreal winters necessarily compare with Winnipeg winters, but it is always a special time when this starts happening after the nightmare that are the winters that we put up with. So not a bad start for the Jets, but they cannot hope to win the series if the sort of the flow of play goes the way that it did yesterday, can they?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you give up 45 or 48 shots on goal and hope to kind of weather that storm every game. It's just not going to work that way. I mean, luckily the Jets were able to block 26 more shots. That easily could have been a 60-shot game in terms of how many pucks saw Connor Hellebuyck, especially after the first period when Nashville put up 20. It wasn't a great game. Players will tell you. I mean, I was listening to Paul Stastny's post-game interview last night. He was talking about, they do need to improve and that sort of thing. But they did keep a lot of shots out of the middle and then kept them a lot around the perimeter. But I mean, it's not going to. I mean, nobody's fooled here. The Jets can't be giving up this many shots against a team that has, Philip Forsberg and players like that. And Philip Forsberg had 6 shots last night. He's going to score eventually on a couple of them, and Connor Hellebuyck's not going to be able to kind of hold the fort, I don't think, through a series if it continued that way.
And every team that's won the Stanley Cup, we were just talking in the last segment with Amalie Benjamin of NHL.com about that great Bruins fourth line, the so-called Merlot line of Thornton, Campbell, and Paillet all those years ago. But it's every Stanley Cup winner gets contributions from guys like that. And in the case of the Jets, their fourth line got off to a hell of a start last night, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Tanev scored the opening goal, and that kind of set the tone for the Jets. I mean, it stopped. It took kind of the crowd out of the game in that first period as Nashville was dominating that first period. And Brandon Tanev manages to get a goal right around the 15-minute mark, if I remember correctly, and kind of just puts that a doubt, I guess, in Nashville that, and then Connor Hellebuyck obviously was solid in net. But yeah, when the first 2 lines of the Jets weren't going, at least in the first period, that's what they needed. They needed somebody else to step up and score. And then once that happened, and you see the second line with Paul Stastny score, and you see Mark Scheifele score a couple of goals, one of them obviously into the empty net there. But third, secondary scoring from this is third and fourth lines of the Jets is something that they need to win, and they've been so good that fourth line, especially with Adam Lowry, and just a physical line. They grind out teams. They're able to shut down the top lines of other teams, and then sometimes they're able to produce, and that's what you need when maybe things aren't going right for some of the stars on the team.
And it doesn't hurt when you have a guy like Brian Little that you can sort of insert there the way that they did. Little, along with Bufflin, Enstrom, and Wheeler, the only holdovers from the days where the franchise was known as the Atlanta Thrashers. This is a lifer for this franchise, and sort of a guy who does whatever they ask. Remember, he was the one who switched his jersey number when they arrived in Winnipeg because Dale Hawerchuk was number 10, so he switches to 18. But he sort of slides in, and a guy who
has spent his career up and down. He's been a number 1 center, he's been a 2, he's been a 3, and yesterday he was a 4. But he just kind of does whatever's asked of him, doesn't he?
Yeah, Brian Little's Brian Little is a coach's dream. He's a GM's dream, and he's an owner's dream. I mean, he's just he's the dream player for a franchise who will literally do anything that you ask of him. And Brian Little's been through so much bad times, in Atlanta and then in Winnipeg, and now it's starting to come together for him. And after the end of the last series, everybody was so happy for Brian Little for him to be finally pick up his first playoff series win, and so I think just Brian Little is that guy who he'll just play anywhere. He'll do anything. He'll play with anybody, and oftentimes he'll excel at doing that. And I think that's why the Jets locked him up for another 6 years. And I think they want him to be a part of what's going on with the young kind of core that's kind of starting to come up with this team. And Brian Little said it himself. I mean, he's so happy to now have a team that looks that has such a bright future.
Yeah, you're right. It's got to be. Given the fact that those franchises at times were sort of a mockery in Atlanta, and there's a reason that team didn't succeed in that market, but those guys have been through a lot, and it is cool to see them sort of rewarded. And by the same token, and this is something we've touched on this show in the past, but it really is sort of a testament to the value of patience and the approach that Kevin Cheveldayoff took building this team, right? It's unusual that a general manager will not sort of make a hasty move, overreact to this happening or that happening. The fact that the Jets are as good as they are and have the team that they have, it really is a demonstration of, hey, you know what? Sometimes waiting it out and drafting and developing and springing and making the right move at the right time, that can be the right move. It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look back and if you were here and you watched kind of how this team developed over the years, and even starting with that first pick of Mark Scheifele, where people are like, oh, what are they doing? Why are they taking Mark Scheifele here? I mean, he was projected to go later on, and so why did they take him? And there were some other picks along the lines that they weren't too sure about, and Mark Scheifele obviously is the one that kind of turned into a elite two-way centerman, and they were very patient with him. They sent him back for his last 2 years in junior and made him earn where he is, and that's been the mantra for every player. I mean, you look at Kyle Connor this year with 31 goals, but he had to earn it. He was starting last year. He had a tough year last year, and then he comes in this year and isn't on the team right away and has to earn that spot. Nikolai Ehlers, another guy. Lots of guys outside of Patrick Laine, he was like one of these kind of generational snipers where he just comes in and he's amazing in terms of his goal scoring prowess. But yeah, I mean, this team has been able to be patient. Fans were not happy for a few years when things weren't going right, and it looked like things weren't paying off. And the goaltending situation, they didn't have Connor Hellebuck yet doing what he's doing this year. So there was a lot of kind of, what's going on? Is Kevin Cheveldayoff the right guy for the job? And, it's turned out that he was. And the Jets just have this trove of talent that has been so deep for them, especially now in the playoffs too, and throughout the regular season when Mark Scheifele went down, when Jacob Trouba went down, guys come up, fill roles, and like you said, there hasn't been a lot of trades. The shortest move that Chevy's made is obviously this Paul Stastny deal that nobody knew was coming until it happened, but he's not made a lot of player deals, but obviously it's turned out that he hasn't had to, and that's just because of how well this team has drafted and how well developed the players have become and how well they've turned into NHL talent.
I love that. I remember sort of as somebody who was a little bit of a junkie for trades and everything that goes on, that I remember when the Leafs got Thomas Plekanec, and it was like, oh, the Jets would have liked to get a guy like that. Oh, fourth line center, yada, yada, yada. And then it was like, well, not so fast. We're perhaps a little bit better than Thomas Plekanec, adding Paul Stastny. And what a weird trade, just that the St. Louis Blues were willing to do that, given the situation that they were in, is highly unusual and indicates maybe sort of a new way of thinking about things that's going on there in St. Louis. But very cool to see Stastny landing there, and the Jets and their fans rewarded with a player of that caliber at the deadline. Really, really cool. All right, Scott, and we're chatting with Scott Billeck. We're on the Winnipeg Jets here. Scott, covering the Jets for NHL.com, the Winnipeg Sun, among other publications. When I think about the Jets, one thing that I worry about is discipline. And maybe this is me just being sort of caught up in the past. Dustin Byfuglien in particular, I think of a crucial game. We both know the series with the Preds is far from over. Full disclosure, I did pick the Jets to win it, but is that much of a concern? Is that still much of a concern that I'm thinking of Game 6, third period, 2 minutes left, it's 3-3, and Dustin Byfuglien cross-checks some guy in the head, or maybe some guy beats Dustin Byfuglien on the outside. This would be the thing, and he hauls the guy down and takes a penalty in a huge moment. Like, how much of a concern is that at this point?
You know, I'm not sure it is. I think fans are. It's always in the back of their heads that something like that could happen. Especially after the first round, the Jets weren't great on the PK, so when they did take penalties, they kind of paid for it, and so I think there is a worry there, but if you watch Dustin Byfuglien in the first round, he wasn't taking a ton of penalties that were egregious, or ones that you would say, oh, here he goes again. This is one of those those bad ones that he's taken. I think this team understands, especially this year, understands the discipline side of the game better, and not taking. They've taken far less penalties this year. They've been a lot better at controlling their sticks, and this started all the way back in training camp when they brought in a referee to try and figure out these new stick infractions and that sort of thing. And so I wouldn't say that anybody's too worried about it. But of course, if it happens, things are gonna blow up here in Winnipeg if it does happen. But for now, I think the Jets have handled themselves reasonably well in this playoffs, outside of a few infractions. Josh Morrissey, of course, is one of them. But I don't think even they took 3 power penalties last night, and were able to navigate all 3 of them. So I don't think it's a huge deal yet. But that's always one of those things that kind of remains to be seen with the Jets. But I think the trend this year hasn't been as much of the case.
Before I let you go, I'm curious about Pascal Vincent, a guy that I'm familiar with from his time in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. He's a hell of a coach. For the uninitiated, he's the coach of the Manitoba Moose, the Jets' American Hockey League affiliate, recently named American Hockey League Coach of the Year. I believe he has a year left on his contract. It does seem like his future is as an NHL head coach. It also seems like Paul Maurice is pretty firmly entrenched in that job there in Winnipeg. What do you think the future is for Pascal Vincent?
Yeah, I mean, another good question, and I think any coach that loves coaching and wants to continue to do that wants to move up to the next level, and it'll just depend, of course, on what's available and that sort of thing. Come after next year, I know the Jets, especially Paul Maurice, like you said, has been very, very happy with how Pascal has dealt with the Moose players and has kind of groomed them for the NHL game. And I think that's been a large part when the Jets changed from Keith McCambridge to Pascal a couple of years ago. I mean, that was a big move. A lot of people didn't really see that one coming, and it's obviously paid off now. He's done a very good job with guys like Kyle Connor, and guys like that who have been able to come up and work themselves in the lineup after playing with the Moose. So I think the Jets would love to retain him, but a guy like Pascal would love to move up into the higher ranks, as you said, and I think he would jump at that opportunity, and it'd be a big loss for the Jets if that was to happen. I don't know one way or the other, but I'm guessing any coach that wants to succeed in coaching wants to keep moving up, and so if there's that opportunity is there, I would imagine that he would take it.
I must, having traveled on buses with his team in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, some long bus trips. This is not a man you want to be on a long bus trip with after a bad performance with the team. Just a very intense guy and a really, really impressive coach. All right, Scott, thanks for your time, man. Really do appreciate it. Have fun watching this series, and enjoy the nice weather in Winnipeg.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers. So that's Scott Billeck. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. Man, those Jets last night. That was crazy. not only did they give up 48 shots, maybe this is the bigger number. And if advanced stats make you angry, well, I'm sorry, you're about to get angry. 87 shot attempts by the Predators. 87 shot attempts compared with just 39 for the Jets. 87-39 were the total attempts, so more than twice as many attempts on goal. The thing that I love about this advanced stats thing, and the fact that people are getting like a little bit more, they're a little bit more on board with it. Corsi, screw Corsi. The only thing that matters is the score. And the best is that if you think about this and you go back in time, and I swear to you that this definitely happened back in the dawn of the National Hockey League, when it was they used to not keep track of shots. 100%. They used to not track shots. And then they started tracking shots, and people would talk about the shots. And I guarantee you there were hockey fans back then who were like, shots mean nothing. That's stupid, because shots were advanced stats at one point. Not anymore. And this is just going to continue. It's the evolution of the game. Big news for Penguins fans. Evgeny Malkin skated with the Penguins today. No word, no official word as to whether he'll be back tomorrow, but that's obviously tremendous news if he's back on the ice, and bad news if you're a fan of the Washington Capitals. Not great news the other night for fans of the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean the San Jose Sharks. Great news for fans of the Golden Knights. That was awesome. But man, the Sharks got lit up by the Vegas Golden Knights the other day. Where did they go from here? That was their worst playoff loss in almost 23 years. Kevin Kurz of The Athletic, covering the San Jose Sharks, is going to join us next. This is Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Had to see what it was gonna be like the second round in Vegas, and super cheesy opening sequence, and then the Vegas Golden Knights come out and just rip it up. And to be fair, I mean, this team is based in Vegas. I think they are allowed to be a little bit cheesy in their pageantry. But wow, was that a crazy start to the second round for the Vegas Golden Knights, and obviously not an ideal start for the San Jose Sharks, their worst playoff loss in almost 23 years. With more on that, Kevin Kurz of The Athletic joins us. He covers the San Jose Sharks for that publication. I urge you to subscribe, not only because of Kevin's outstanding work, but because of the outstanding work of everybody working there. They just keep adding people. I mean, this is every week we hear about another big name or two or three. Kevin Kurz, how you doing, man?
Good.
I'm doing well, and having a little trouble hearing you there. Do you mind just saying something to see if we're going to be okay here? Yeah, no, I cannot hear you. I'm sure we can get that straightened out. I mean, it's 2018 and technology and all the rest of it. So
I'm trying again. Hold on.
But yes, the San Jose Sharks, was that rust? You can't use rust as an excuse, right? Yes, they hadn't played for a long time, but nor had the Vegas Golden Knights. This is a battle-hardened team. It seemed like a lot of people were taking the Sharks to win this series, and with good reason. I mean, that's a really good San Jose team. They're going to get Joe Thornton back at some point. That would certainly give them a boost, but I said enough's enough. As somebody who makes predictions and spends a lot of time talking about hockey, I have been writing off the Vegas Golden Knights from day one, nonstop, and waiting for that bubble to burst. And this was the first time. I picked LA to win the first round series against them. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm just going to say that Vegas is going to win. Maybe they're going to win the Stanley Cup. It would be the most ridiculous thing in the history of ever. Should we try again with
Kevin's back?
Kevin, you there, bud?
Say it again.
Kevin?
Yeah, you got me?
Hey, there he is, loud and clear. So not exactly an ideal start for the Sharks the other night, eh?
No, not so much. Yeah, they just for whatever reason, I don't know if it was a long layoff or the matchup's bad for them. There's a whole list of things that went wrong, obviously. So, we'll see if they can clean it up here for game 2.
And that's it. We often sort of hear, and so many of us in the hot take culture want to sort of talk about, oh, well, I mean, we saw that one thing happen, and therefore that should carry over to next game. Momentum can be a fickle thing, especially in a Stanley Cup playoff series. But this is a veteran team. This is a group, for the most part, that has been through a whole lot of stuff when it comes to the playoffs. I mean, there's no reason to expect that something like that carries over from game to game, is there?
No, I don't think so. And, I do think the Sharks will be a whole lot better tonight, just because based on this team, rarely would we see them go through extended periods where they were just bad every night. So, I think that's one thing about this team is that Pete DeBoer really does have them ready every night, and they work hard every night. And I think, game 1, I think it just kind of snowballed a little bit. You give up 1, you give up 2, and then it got a whole lot uglier in a short period of time. So, I don't think there's momentum that carries over. You just look at game 1 or round 1 when the Penguins beat the Flyers 7-0, and they lost game 2 5-1. So, I think there is, and Joe Pavelski was talking about that yesterday. Momentum has to be reestablished on a nightly basis. So even though it was a little lopsided, I don't think that'll have much of an effect on tonight. The bigger question is, can the Sharks play with these guys? Because they played them 5 times now, including 4 in the regular season. And they only, they've yet to beat them in regulation.
And is that, you hear the word speed when people are talking about Vegas, opportunistic too. This is a team that seems to just make the most of their opportunities. And I guess it's debatable whether that's sustainable or not, but it's working for now, right? Like, is that it? Is it a speed thing?
Well, the Sharks were sloppy. I mean, they fed right into their attack. They couldn't get the puck through the neutral zone. They were caught flat-footed a couple times. Some missed assignments, just things that we don't typically see with this team, especially when they're on their game. And, to me, it starts with Brent Burns. I think Brent Burns is the key to this series. And there's some reason to believe he might be playing hurt a little bit, but, he's such an offensive weapon for this team. He only had 1 shot on goal. But defensively, it's been a roller coaster year for him in his own end. And there were a couple times, I think, in game 1, particularly in the first period, where if he was just a little bit more responsible, a little bit more engaged, that probably wipes at least 2 of the 4 goals off of the score sheet from that Vegas had when they were up 4-0. So he's the key for me. He's got to be a whole lot better. He's got to be that Norris Trophy level guy that we saw, frankly, pretty commonly after Joe Thornton got hurt. I think Brent Burns kind of buttoned up his game and was just dominant. I don't know if that was because Joe got hurt and he felt more responsibility, but that wasn't the guy we saw in game one, and he's got to get back to it here if this team's going to have any shot in this series or any shot at a deep run.
We're chatting with Kevin Kurz, who covers the San Jose Sharks for The Athletic, and this is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna, with you for the next 15 minutes or so, all around the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Kevin, I know you wrote about this for The Athletic, but they've had a little time to marinate, the Sharks, after that 7-0 loss in game one. What did they do to get over it?
Yeah, well, I mean, not having Evander Kane, first of all, isn't helpful because he's one of the guys that I think does really fit, can help counteract what Vegas does out there. So, he's out right away. That leaves a huge hole in the left side. We don't know who's going to fill that in, how Pete DeBoer is going to deploy his line tonight, just because there was no morning skate with the early start. So, right away, they're in a little bit of a hole. But, they just have to be a little bit cleaner with the puck, maybe tighten up a little bit. Don't turn it over in the neutral zone. Don't feed into their attack. And, that's the biggest thing is just, don't give, obviously Vegas is good at creating scoring chances on their own. Don't give them, the odd man rushes and, the sloppiness and the looseness in the defensive zone. Because if you do that, you're toast.
Right. Okay. And you can read more about what the Sharks sort of did to get over that from Kevin at the Athletic. And again, I urge you to subscribe to that website. Certainly, among the best money that I spend every month. The suspension to Patrick Kane. Do you think they got that right?
Well, I didn't know if they were going to suspend him one way or the other, but you look at the play again, and, it wasn't really a scrum. It was like Joe Pavelski and Nate Schmidt were pushing and shoving a little bit. Pavelski already had a slashing minor coming, and then the play was over, and Bellemare kind of skated towards the crease, and Kane just really came out of nowhere and hit him once in the back, and then he turned around and hits him right in the face. So, you know what? I mean, I don't think you can argue with the suspension. I don't think the hit was maybe as vicious as some of the other ones that we've seen in terms of suspensions in the playoffs, but just the fact that Bellemare wasn't involved in any sort of scrum at all. The play was over, and I understand what Kane's trying to do. The game's a blowout at that point. You're trying to maybe rally the troops a little bit for game two, but that wasn't the way to do it. So, I'm not going to complain over that suspension just because I can understand a little bit just because it was really out of nowhere. Bellemare's standing there, the play's over, and all of a sudden he's getting a fistful, a mouthful of Kane's stick.
Yeah. I mean, is this those who have been critical of Kane, and there are, I'm sure, a variety of reasons for this. In my opinion, most of them are stupid, but is this the kind of thing that was a concern when they acquired this guy? Is it fair to say that?
Well, I don't think, no, not on the ice. I mean, he's not a dirty player. He's only been suspended once in his career before this, so I don't think there's any concern with any of the on ice stuff. There was certainly, some off ice stuff that was talked about and gets publicity, and rightfully so. Some things that mistakes he made earlier in his career, but since he's been here, he's been great. He's been. I think he's fit right into the room. I think the guys really like him. I think his play has obviously been outstanding. And, I don't think a suspension or a headshot like that, obviously it was a stupid thing for him to do. And I think he'll admit that. And he has admitted that he regretted it. But, I don't think, I think those two things are unrelated.
Good. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on that. And, when it comes to Evander Kane, it's just like anything else. I think it's so crazy that, clearly he's a good hockey player, a guy who's been good for 30 goals a year on more than one occasion, that when you are in your early 20s, maybe you're going to do stuff that isn't the smartest, but all of us have done this. It just hasn't been in the public eye. People grow up, and I love the way that it's worked out. And I love the story, and maybe it was from you that I heard it, that Joe Thornton went and picked him up at the airport when they acquired him. Is that true?
Yeah, those two are pretty good friends. They know each other for whatever reason. I think it was through Devin Setaguchi, who played in Winnipeg and was already friends with Joe. And I think they actually spent some time here in Vegas in the off season together, if I'm remembering correctly. So they've been friends for a long time. Everybody likes Joe Thornton, so
especially his teammates. So that's really no surprise. But he hasn't played with Thornton yet because since he picked him up, Joe hasn't been able to get back in the lineup there.
And what's the story there? I know that he's skated a bit. Do we know anything more about when we might see him, if we might see him?
I've been trying to read the tea leaves here the whole time, and I've been correct pretty much with it spot on. Since the start, I didn't think we were going to see him in the first round. I tend to think there's a chance we see him in this round. He's continuing to skate. I think he's looking stronger every day, but he's not going to play tonight. And then I guess we'll have to see when we get back to San Jose. But he's clearly getting closer. He's been on the ice a ton, but he's made it clear that he's not going to return unless that knee is strong. And he's, if he comes back, he's coming back to stay in the lineup. It's not going to be any sort of thing where he wants to play, 8 or 9 minutes a night and then, maybe have to miss the next game. If he comes back, he's going to stay in the lineup, and he's just not at that point yet.
It should be a fun team to follow for not just the next couple of weeks, but the next couple of months with the possibility. I keep hearing San Jose coming up in the John Tavares conversation, and if they're going to be in on them, it should be a lot of fun, and I hope we can talk about them again soon. Kevin, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Connor. Anytime.
That is Kevin Kurz of the Athletic, and he covers the San Jose Sharks. I'm Conor McKenna of Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. Should we do a draft lottery simulator right now at tankathon.com and tell you the results live here? We've got 4 hours and 39 minutes to go until the NHL draft lottery. Well, until the first, the first 11 picks are revealed. And then we got to wait another 2 hours until we get the top 3. But are you hyped? Are you stoked for the NHL draft lottery? Let's do it, baby. We're simming the lottery right now. Who's going to win it? Oh, no. The Ottawa Senators won my simulation. Detroit moved up 3 spots to number 2, and the Islanders jump up 7 spots to number 3. If you're a Sabres fan, you went down to 4. The Coyotes down to 5. Montreal's at 6. Disaster. All right. So anyway, coming up next, I want to talk about the Leafs since we haven't done this, and I know that there's a lot of upset people in Toronto. There are a lot of people whose anger has been targeted at guys like Jake Gardiner. Let's talk a little bit about what the next move is for the Toronto Maple Leafs. What a difference, I should say, a year makes between the first-round exits from the playoffs and the sort of reaction to those. So let's talk about that next. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. saw in the Pittsburgh-Washington series. But either way, we've got playoff hockey. There should be a lot of terrific games, and I'm fired up for this one. Another one later on tonight. Vegas looks to take a 2-0 lead against the San Jose Sharks. Is Toronto still reeling a little bit from Wednesday night losing Game 7? Man, were people sad about that. Not quite on the level of a 4-1 lead blown in the third period, but still you were winning in the third period of Game 7. And what was the philosophy there? What, sit back and wait for the Boston Bruins? Did nobody notice that Jake DeBrusk had 4 goals leading into the goal that he scored where he turned Jake Gardiner the wrong way? Yes, Gardiner turned the wrong way, but what was Freddie Anderson doing? He didn't even take a shot. He just like slid the puck and it somehow got through him. Put your stick on the ice. Goaltending 101. Put your stick on the ice. Cover the 5-hole, baby.
I mean, I think all year we've been talking about how Boston does this. You know, you can't sit back. I mean, how many times have we watched afternoon games with Boston where they'll be down and then they'll tie the game?
It's true.
And, you know, it didn't happen just once, and they've been doing this all year. So I feel like Toronto should have been paying a little bit more attention to, I guess, you know, all the precedent.
So what do you do if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs? I think that now that we've had a couple of days for the dust to clear, you can sort of look at this. And I think there's a couple of things that are really important to remember. The first thing is this. Don't let emotions dictate what you do. I mean, how many people are like, get rid of Jake Gardiner? You know what? This is Jake Gardiner. We know this. He has that in him, and he has brilliance in him, too. He made big plays in that series that nobody seems to want to remember, but to good pitches, keeping the puck in, nice plays that help the Toronto Maple Leafs. And yes, you do have to take the bad with the good, but I think personally that Jake Gardiner gives more good than he does bad. But you don't just catapult Jake Gardiner and make him the scapegoat the way so many people have wanted to do. The problems are bigger than that. It's not Jake Gardiner's fault that the Leafs spent so much time hemmed into their own end. I think you've got something going with Mike Babcock there. I know that this is sacrilege to do. I'm going to criticize Mike Babcock for a couple of things. One of them is the system. He's got to adapt. They can't keep trying to throw the puck up the middle of the ice and to get it out of the zone. The Bruins killed them on this. This is a systemic problem. Also, Mike Babcock, stop using Roman Polak. No more Roman Polak. And the biggest thing of all, Nick Kyprios, who is a reputable member of the media, as far as I'm concerned, reported that Mike Babcock lost Austin Matthews. Now, if there's even a nugget of truth to that, and Matthews had a bad series, for me was the most disappointing player for the Leafs, that's an issue. Because Mike Babcock has had his issues. He's a tough love kind of guy. He's had issues with non-millennial type players. Millennial players are different. We know this. You've got to give them the why. You've got to give them a little bit of TLC. And Austin Matthews is going to be a Leaf for a long, long time. Him and Mike Babcock better come up with a way of coexisting. But I'm sorry, Leafs fans. I was pulling for you guys on Wednesday night. That's all the time we have. Enjoy it. We're going to turn it over to coverage of the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston Bruins. That's coming up right after this. This was Hockey Primetime. Don't forget to check out our podcast page.